Welcome to today's episode of Unapologetic Living. I am super excited to share with you another scoliosis warrior or goddess that I met through Instagram and social media. Her name is Stacy Joyce, and she is an instructor with the Yoga for Scoliosis, right? That's an actual program, Yoga for Scoliosis specific, right? That's a certification in and of itself, or
Yes, I did a specific training for that. Yeah.
well, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. I know you're also dabbling in some Pilates, and that's newer for you, but I know that just with what little that you shared with me, that you too found yourself on this journey because your own personal story.
Oh, yes. We all have a story. They interlap, but they're also different and unique.
Yeah. So you want to share a little bit about your journey with scoliosis with the audience?
Sure. It's like where to begin. So like many, I had the Adams Forward test done when I was in elementary school, and the nurse identified mild childhood scoliosis, and there was just no consideration given to what that meant. And when I was a freshman in high school, I was trying on bathing suits for spring break. And I noticed my lower back on one side was protruding. And I thought it was a tumor. I was like, what
Mm.
else could be sticking out of my back like this? So went to the doctor, went to the specialist, and lo and behold, that scoliosis wasn't mild anymore. And especially being that my main curve was in the lumbar area, it's a little harder to identify than if you're seeing something in the shoulder and the upper back. So it was at a time in the mid 90s where it was just like, oh, we wait and see. There was never talk about doing any therapy, any bracing. It was just wait and see. And my surgeon said that he wanted to wait until I was finished growing. But it got to the point where he scooted the surgery up a little sooner because my curve was progressing so rapidly. And I was in constant pain. And I was never told, oh, this is a stretch you could do. This is a movement you could do. This is some breath work. I took nothing. I was just in pain. So when I was 16, I had a spinal fusion. 11 vertebrae were fused, and I had Harrington rods. And afterwards, I remember seeing the pictures, and I was really disappointed. I was like, I thought you were going to fix my back. Like, what is this? And nowadays, some of the pictures are remarkable, like the symmetry that they get in the spine. And it did help balance me out. I did gain 1.5 inches or so, but there's still a lot of curvature in the spine. When I hear about surgeries nowadays compared to when I had mine, it just feels like a night and day difference. I hear about people having a surgery and being up in 2 days walking, and that blows my mind. So, and I've talked to people who had the surgery done in like the 60s, and they have been in a full body plaster cast for almost a year. So I'm grateful that I didn't go through that. But my experience, I was in the hospital for 3 whole weeks, and I didn't know what I was in for. I thought I was going to be painting. So I was really in denial about like what was going on, what it looked like, how I was going to feel. And actually, since I had my surgery, I never went back to painting. I just wanted to sleep and stare at the ceiling. So I had a surgery done through the front of my spine. I know a rib was removed. And then a week later, I had the long fusion surgery done through my back. And then I was in the hospital 2 more weeks. I wore a back brace for about 6 months after my surgery, which nowadays, generally, that's not the case. People are not needing to wear a brace after their surgery. And my doctor, it was about 1.5 years after my surgery, was like, okay, you have full clearance now. You can do whatever you want. But I didn't feel like I was confident at all to do anything. So around that time, so I had the fusion when I was 16. It was around when I went to college that I could just, do whatever I wanted. And initially I went to college at the beach, and I remember being scared to even step into the ocean because I thought, well, a wave might knock me down.
Mm.
I just didn't do anything physical. I didn't do sports beforehand. So it was a slow process, I feel like, to even think about doing something like yoga. But it was around that time that I took my first yoga class. And this was in the time where women's gyms were really popular. So I think that felt like less intimidating. And I certainly was not flexible at all, but I really liked the yoga, and I felt like it was safe. You didn't have to be coordinated. It wasn't like a step aerobics class, which were popular at the time. And I just stuck with it through the years. And looking back, it wasn't that I was super consistent with it, but it was always a part of my life. You know, maybe I might take a couple months off or this or that, but I always stuck with it. And thinking back, I think it helped a lot with reconnecting myself to my body. I think that I was too young and naive to realize what was going on. And so I just separated myself from my body and just kind of like showed up, like, okay, do this surgery. And then like, when can I leave? Was how I felt about it. So I stuck with my yoga practice for many years. The rest of my high school years, when I think about high school, I think about my back surgery. Like, it was just such a big part of that period. But when I think about college and afterwards, I didn't think about my back at all. I studied abroad a lot. I traveled abroad. I did a semester living on a ship after college. I was in the Peace Corps in Honduras. So I lived in Central America for 2 years. So I did whatever I wanted to do. And it wasn't until my late 20s, after working a number of office jobs, I was living in New York City, the back pain just got to be too much. And I think it's the environment too. It's like the hustle and bustle of the city, and it's the stress of the job, and it's, being stuck at a desk all day. And that's when I started practicing yoga even more. And at a certain point, I decided I can do yoga all weekend. I can go to a 6 a.m. class. I can go to a 7:30 p.m. class. It doesn't erase the fact that like I'm miserable Monday through Friday with pain. So that's when I decided to take my yoga teacher training. And I don't even know if I thought I would teach. I don't know what I thought, but I was kind of like at my wit's end. And I completed the 200 hour. I felt great about it. And I dived into the 300 hour. And for my project, I decided to present to my training group what it meant to practice yoga with scoliosis and a spinal fusion. And that's really when my journey began. It wasn't the material I was learning from my teachers, but I sought out the specialized teachers in New York City who taught for back care, who taught for scoliosis. And I kind of knew of some of these studios and teachers, but it was like not convenient or out of the way. And so around that time, it was 2012, I took my first yoga and scoliosis infusions class with Mimi Rossetti. And it was great, and it was horrible. And it was like life-changing, like everything all at once. It was like, I've never been in a room with people who had a back similar to mine. I realized that I was doing all sorts of things that were not going to be beneficial for my back in the long run. I realized that I'd spent so much time and energy on this yoga training program, learning things that I was not going to be practicing anymore and probably not teaching. And I just cried after I left that class. I just cried on the subway on my way home, because I was like, what am I doing? I can't be a yoga teacher. I really learned the importance of like protecting those areas above your fusion and below your fusion. So once my emotions settled down, I decided, okay, Stacy, you have been practicing yoga. It benefits you in so many ways. You can still teach it. You can just do it your own way. And so that's what I've decided to do, is like focus my teaching on teaching yoga to, I teach yoga to a lot of people who have never done yoga in their life. They've never stepped in a studio in their life. They think it's not for them. And I like to be the one who's like, yes, it is for everyone. There's something that all of us can do. We can do it differently. We don't have to do all these pretzel-like poses or things that are like fast-paced. And so that's where, that's where I came into really like my passion, my soul-led path, and what I do nowadays. And around that time, 2012, I took my first yoga for scoliosis workshop with Deborah Wolk. And I've studied so much with her ever since then. And, I feel like, especially since COVID in the last 4 years, there's so much more on like social media and there's so much more online. And for a while, there was like nothing. And I remember going to that first workshop and getting information. And I just felt like so grateful and overjoyed. And I still have the email that I sent to Deborah afterward. And I know that you understand this. We want people who understand us, and we want people that can help guide us and feeling like safe and understood. So those are really instrumental teachers for me. And in 2019, I started Elise Miller's Yoga for Scoliosis Teacher Training program, which I finished the following year. And it's always a learning process. We have scoliosis, and then we have this fusion. So for a while, I felt really conflicted. Like, where do I stand? I'm not really in this camp. I'm kind of over here. And then I just, had to realize over time, life isn't so cookie cutter and easy sometimes. And even within the fusion world, someone's could be short, someone's could be long, someone could be fused in the lumbar to the sacrum. So we are all so different. So my fusion is from my shoulder blade area into my mid lumbar, which is kind of a typical length for an older type fusion. So in the fall, this fall, it will be 30 years since I had my fusion. So I'm happy to feel like I know now what takes care of my spine instead of just doing what I can. So I like to think of not using the words I can't, but saying like I choose not to. So it's not that I can't do a lot of poses, it's that I choose not to, because I know that my unfused vertebrae are working even harder because I have these fused vertebrae.
Yeah, it's amazing, really, because you are much sooner to the game than I am on even like, I had never even looked up yoga for scoliosis until we had our phone conversation the other day, and realized that there was even, honestly, I've been doing all this yoga. Now, luckily, I guess, like when I think about everything you're sharing, for me, I really have only practiced twice a week. And I do tend to practice as I teach. And maybe 3 times, but I don't teach a lot. And sometimes I think maybe like knowing what I know now, it's probably been beneficial, because I was teaching your traditional yoga twists and back, all these things that really now I'm not even integrating into my own practice anymore.
Yeah. And there's so much overlap with other people and back conditions too, that we don't need these big twists and back bends.
Yeah. And, but it was just the Schroth method, and meeting this PT back in maybe, I think I saw him for the first time in February, that I even started to like look and change the way I've been practicing, which does make me, it's definitely been a challenge, right? Learning on my own on how I'm going to, because he's kind of given me some tips here and there on what to do and not to do. which has been great. But you know, I'm excited and grateful to find out that there actually is, you know, people out there doing yoga, teaching, instructing yoga specific to scoliosis. And as you mentioned, everybody is so different. And, you know, I do have randomly, you know, power of the universe, whatever, years ago ended up, they found me, I was teaching donation-based yoga classes at a church in town, and these ladies found me. They just so happened to have scoliosis. They're in their 60s and 70s. But I never taught any different to them, you know. I mean, I definitely, my yoga class has changed dramatically over the last 5 years with my fascial stretch therapy training and the life stretch class that they teach. But even since then, you know, so it's it's just different, really. It's not your traditional vinyasa class, or I don't even necessarily go through the sun salutations, you know, the way so many traditional classes are taught. But I started thinking about, you know, all our spines are different. Maybe things should be different for each of us, right?
Yes,
One has her curve to the right, the other one's to the left. So
yes.
really, I would be teaching to them differently a
Yeah,
little bit.
and, you know, like what I'm sort of like working with now is like, what is a good starting point for a student? Some people love to figure out all that information right away, and like, where are my curves, and in learning the vocabulary. And other people can get really overwhelmed and then feel like I might do something wrong, and then they step away.
Mm-hmm.
So I found like lately, I've definitely been like putting on the brakes a little bit more, and feel like, you know, there's no rush to learn everything, and we don't have to learn it all in a day, to really like take the time. But eventually, like, it's really important for you to know what's going on in your back. And I've seen this with people who practice a lot, and even in teachers, is, you know, sometimes in our mind, like, we have to stop and we have to think, and we've seen the x-rays and we feel how our back feels against a wall or the floor or a chair. But like, sometimes it still gets confusing, because what's happening in the back body is opposite in the front body, and then it's opposite on the right to the left side of the body. So it's sometimes it's like, it's tiring just on itself, just to like think about, like, wait, where am I supposed to breathe? Wait, where do I lean? Where do I collapse? Where do I rotate forward? And so we have to give ourselves permission that, like, this isn't an overnight process. This isn't a, you know, quick PDF download of like, okay, do these few things. I feel like it's really an integration into your everyday life, you know, how you carry yourself, how you, let's say you watch TV, or let's say like how you're loading the dishwasher, you know, things like that, learning to hip hinge. Are you falling into your pattern? Because, you know, just a new student yesterday told me, she's like, but it feels so good. It's like, yes, one side, everything's easy, and that's where your body just wants to go. But do we want to promote that? Or are we trying to find more symmetry and balance? So these things take, you know, could they take months? Could they take years? Could they take decades? Like, you know, our level of awareness is always going to be changing. So there's never a stopping point.
And I know too, right, the neural pathways are set, even though, right? And so when I'm like, a couple things that the Schroth practitioner has me doing is like really trying to find alignment, right? Breathe into the front rib cage here, and then the back on the left, right? To create some derotation as well. And so I'm here, even if I'm doing like bicep curls, right? I'm trying to hold the alignment for the thoracic, because that's what he has to work with as far as Schroth goes. He can't really do anything with the fused part. But when I'm like that, I feel crooked, right? So my head's doing this thing. My boyfriend will be like, why's your head going that way? And now your mouth's doing things, because I feel crooked, even though my spine is in alignment, at this point?
Yes.
Because I'm used to being the other way, right? Where I just fall this way, right? Fall that way.
Knowing where we are in space is challenging. When I'm in poses, without a doubt, I usually am like, where's my head? Like, I don't know, am I dropping it? Am I like lifting it? I'm just like not really sure. So in the yoga that I've learned through Deborah Wolk and Elise Miller, it's very Iyengar based. It uses a lot of props, using alignment, maybe even having, if you don't have lines on your floor, making lines on your mat, knowing where is center. So it's nice if you had a teacher in your room to say like, oh, you're reaching your straight arms over to the right, but we don't always have that. So like, what can we do on our own to line our props up or find lines in our environment to gauge where our body is in space?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's and the lines. I didn't even think about like adding lines to because you can feel like you're perfectly straight and you're not. Yeah, like so it's definitely the lines could be valuable. I never even thought about that.
I recently put a poster up in my yoga room, and I told my husband like I shouldn't do this. Like I know it's going to be crooked. Somebody else needs to gauge what's level.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So you said you had a lot of pain, and I didn't experience a lot of pain that I can recall. But you also didn't have your fusion till 16. I was 12. I
No.
know we're both the same age. I'm 46. So I think my fusion would be 34 years old now. I didn't really remember any pain until after the fact. But I do, another mom reached out to me about her daughter who is talking about pain, and they found out she had some mild scoliosis as well. I just don't recall that. I was a pretty active kid. Were you, when you were in that pain, did you recall, do you recall? Did it keep you from doing things? I know, that's such a hard time in life.
I participated in a couple sports in middle school. It was just because a friend asked me, like, oh, join the track team one year, join field hockey one year. I wasn't particularly good. I didn't care. I didn't practice running. So the time I was in high school at that time when I discovered my scoliosis had progressed, I wasn't doing anything active. And probably that would have helped had I been doing something active in my life, but I did not. And, I didn't even think that there was a way to, I didn't even know that there was a way to relieve pain.
Yeah. Yeah, and so did you find, okay, so like today, do you find that do you live with pain? Like this morning, I overdid something on Saturday and I have pain in my lats today, in my right lat. My right shoulder blade's the one that sticks out. And I'm just now, not, I agree with you. Yoga really helped me to become more in touch with my body. And I think that's probably most people when they find yoga, they're so disconnected from their bodies that it is a great way to begin to become super aware.
Yeah, to listen. On a regular basis, no, I don't have daily pain. But it's a lot of trial and error, and it's a lot of like listening, and it's a lot of like knowing what works for me, what doesn't. So, like little things. For example, I've been invited to go to maybe like a small event or something that's like 45 minutes drive, and it's an hour event, and I'll be like, no, because a lot of driving does not agree with me. So I'm like, if it's not worth it, I'm just not going to put myself into a car to drive more than necessary. Some activities, like let's say cleaning or stuff like that around the house, I just do like little bits here and there. I'm never like, oh, I'm cleaning the house today and doing a lot, because I just don't want a lot of that repetitive work or hinging. And it's not that I don't know what to do, but sometimes it just gets like tiring, like always thinking about the hip hinging and so forth.
So do you think it's the hip hinging that creates some of that tension and pain? Because I can tell you right now, yes,
It helps.
if I I have to like be careful with sweeping with a broom. Because it will start to tweak my low left side, which is the curve is to the left. The spine pushes to the left in my lower lumbar. And so that'll get really tight during certain activities. Sweeping is one of them. So
Yes.
I'm like a one-arm sweeper, and people are like, why do you sweep that way?
Like a vacuum cleaner. It's like, especially if your vacuum has like some heaviness to it, it's like, is that going to aggravate your shoulder? So, you can try to switch hands. It's not going to be as effective, but sometimes try to use I'm right-handed, so try to use my left hand for a little while just to switch it up. But like I said, I just know I'm not going to do a lot of any one thing. We had moved last summer from New Jersey to North Carolina. And in my space where I had been teaching, I was washing the walls. And I just think all this repetitive motion of washing the walls, which isn't hard per se, but it was just so repetitive. I started to have shoulder issues, and I was like, oh my gosh, do I have frozen shoulder? But really for a couple months, I had to really baby my shoulder. I couldn't practice things like downward dog anymore. And, we look back and we try to identify what caused the pain, and, we don't know, but I mean, one thing, I think it was all that cleaning of the walls for me. So
I mean, it makes sense to me. I can hear that. So which poses would you say that you don't have to share all of them, that you might leave out or modify, maybe?
So, talking about the sun salutation, you brought up the sun salutation before. I don't teach anything like that. Because sometimes when I first started teaching yoga for scoliosis, it was all about, how do I modify? How do I go to a normal class? How do I go to a regular class and kind of participate, but then change a little things here or there? And then I just got to the point of progressing is well, how about just doing what benefits me and not always modifying? So the sun salutation, if you were in a group class, and I mean, I understand that they can be fun, yes, there's ways to modify and do that differently, but upward facing dog is definitely one that I don't do. So the forward fold, Uttanasana, touching tips to the floor, going back to that Adams forward fold test, the screening for scoliosis, when somebody is folded forward in flexion of the spine, they're looking for the maximal rotation of the scoliotic curves to screen you for scoliosis. And so if this is bringing out our scoliosis, why do we want to keep flexing our spine? So that's why I tell people, I'm like, the hip hinge is your friend. If you don't want to go into your scoliosis pattern, keep that length in the spine, be strong in the legs and the glutes, and hinge at the hips. So definitely the twist, we can't isolate one curve, because what seems like would benefit one curve, there's going to be compensatory curves above or below.
Right.
Of course, with the fusion, that's a solid long bone. So there's not going to be any movement there, and we're just overtaxing the vertebrae above and below. So at some point, we all deal with disc degeneration. So if we want to slow that down, then let's not put too much load on those vertebrae. I see in some groups, people will say I have a fusion, I want to go jet skiing, I want to do all these kinds of things. And it's you can do whatever you want to do. I mean, for me, I feel I prefer to have a more conservative approach. And I'm no, I don't need it. I'm sure those things are fun. I can do them. I'm probably not going to see anything happen right away, but to me, it's just not worth the risk. So.
Yeah, I hear you. There are some things in hindsight at 46, I'm and when I was 16, it was about 4 years later, I jumped off this 25-foot cliff somewhere out in Colorado. I don't even think I thought about it, right? As you said, there was a period of time I wasn't even really thinking about my scoliosis. And again, it really hasn't been until, what prompted this was, last summer, I herniated 3 discs in my neck.
Wow.
And so, I started seeing a physical therapist for that, and that really helped. And had some dry needling that was awesome. But I think a lot of it is these traps start doing work because my blow traps are weak, uh, according to my Schroth PT. And so I don't know. Again, I thought, gosh, if I'm going to have physical therapy, I really should find someone who actually focuses and has a specialty in scoliosis, just period, because it affects the whole body.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
so then I went from the neck, and then I was having tennis elbow down my right arm. Well, this is, my right shoulder. I'm like, you know what? I'm just switching PTs. And so and he happened to, specialize in the Schroth method, which is what? So it was this neck thing, and my chiropractor saying, you have compensatory curves, all because, right, your whole spine is different. And so you are going to have, trouble maybe further up or below this fusion. And I think that's what really prompted me to think, okay, I'm 46, I'm getting older, and I know things can also change as we, go into perimenopause and menopause. So, and I don't know.
I meet women all the time who either are diagnosed with adult onset scoliosis, so no signs of anything all throughout their life, but after menopause, there is some disc degeneration, there's some imbalances, and it can lead to scoliosis. Or that mild scoliosis after menopause, all of a sudden it's progressed and it's changing the way that their body looks, how their body feels, and then it's like something that they're addressing. So it's definitely nice to feel like you can be a bit in the preventative. I mean, we can only do it so much, but still like be ready and do what you can and gather the information that you can to take care of yourself before you feel like you're too down a path where, like you said about your neck, you're having like all this like pain and you're having to like get constant care, and it just becomes like life consuming. We know what that's like.
Yeah, and chronic pain is debilitating and depressing, and it makes you just, I just like, golly, it was bad last summer, and I did not feel good. You go into this place. I know I went into this place of fear that the pain would never go away. And so that can take you down a whole nother rabbit hole. And, I personally am training to have an awesome, mobile, very active life at 70, not to make sure I look good in a bathing suit this summer. Like I want a thriving life full of vitality as long as I can be. So I know that you teach yoga for scoliosis. Do you only teach scoliosis, those with scoliosis, do you find, or do you teach
I would say about maybe sometimes like half of my students have scoliosis, because a lot of people have back issues. Back issues are very common. And so when people hear about what I do, they'll still reach out, and it's like, oh, I don't have scoliosis, but what about this or that? And even those of us with scoliosis, at a certain age, if you get that x-ray, if you get that MRI, that report's going to have more in there than scoliosis. Usually there's like other things going on in the spine. So I do work with other people or other types of back conditions. Definitely more people with scoliosis than with spinal fusions. And yeah.
And so now, do you teach group classes when you teach, even like larger group, or are they smaller group?
So I moved last year, and before I had moved, I had done some group series with scoliosis. But since I'd moved, I've been teaching, it's about 50-50 in person and online.
Okay.
Occasionally I'll teach workshops. I'm planning one for the fall, specific to fusion. So I'll teach workshops virtually because most people don't have a yoga for scoliosis teacher in their neighborhood. So people need to like, embrace the Zoom. I mean, I appreciate that I can access teachers that I normally can't. with that platform. I do teach one group yoga class per week. It will actually be at 12:30 today. And I teach that for Samankaya Yoga, Back Care and Scoliosis Collective. It's a studio in New York City that really caters exclusively to yoga classes that are therapeutic based for people with back conditions, scoliosis, and fusions. So in the back care class that I teach, some people have scoliosis, some people don't. We all have a good time.
Yeah,
And we
yeah.
all benefit from a lot of the same, some movement and some breath and some relaxation.
And then so do you you do teach online virtually, and anybody whether spinal fusion, scoliosis, or just back issues can find you
Yeah,
in
anyone
these
can find me.
classes?
I also teach, privately, whether it's where I live in Lake Norman in North Carolina, or I have students who are out of state. So we have our Zoom sessions. I tell people which kind of props to have to set up, and it's effective. And for some people who have a back condition, even if they live locally, they might not even want to deal with traffic and being in a car. So having that option is really helpful for them too. And then regarding the Pilates, I teach that at a local studio, Lake Norman Pilates, doing the sessions there.
So then, okay, and then before we conclude, when you are working with the individuals with scoliosis or the spinal fusion, I mean, maybe in any case, do you find that I know you mentioned it can become, a journey to really understand your curves. Do you ask for x-rays or any information? I mean, obviously we don't read diagnostic stuff. I mean, maybe you do. I don't.
Definitely ask, because it's interesting what you may find. So some people don't have anything, or they don't have access, or they moved, and I say, like, that's fine. And if they have it, like, I like to see it. And for example, somebody I started working with has a cervical fusion. He never mentioned scoliosis. And then reading through his reports, I'm like, did you know you have scoliosis? So it's like sometimes it's just too much information, and somebody's at the doctor because of one thing or in one segment of the spine, and they're not thinking about the rest. So I definitely ask to see the images or the reports, just because sometimes it brings up information that maybe somebody forgot to mention or isn't really aware of themselves.
Yeah, that's funny. People do. They'll forget things. As a fascial stretch therapist and doing some body work, I'll ask if they've had maybe a surgery and they've forgotten until we're laying there on the table 3 sessions in. Oh yeah, I had my appendix taken out. Okay, that's big.
Yeah.
But it's funny how you think some of these things are inconsequential or non-significant when they are more significant than one might think when it comes to body mechanics or emotions, right? The mind, body, and spirit, how these things can affect, again, the whole human, the whole being. And
We kind of like file them away in our brain, but they're still in our body.
right. Yeah. I always think of that book, and you've probably read it. The Body Keeps the Score. I don't know if, yeah. So
It's a heavy read.
it's a heavy read, and it stays on my shelf as a resource book. It's a good one, but it is a heavier read for sure. Well, thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
So if anyone wants to find me on Instagram, my handle is Scoliosis Fusion, or if you want to check out my website, it's Spinal Fusion Yoga, and you can join my newsletter or something, and maybe join a workshop or a class.
Okay. Is that spinalfusionyoga.com?
Yes.
Okay. And then you said what'd you just say for Instagram?
My Instagram handle is Scoliosis Fusion.
Okay, Scoliosis Fusion.
So the
Okay.
fusion for those of us who have the fusion, or the fusion of movements, whether it's the Pilates, the yoga, incorporating whatever it is that we need to feel better.
Yeah, that's I love that. My business here is Fusion Stretch, and when I came up with that name, I was laying on this table having energy work, and I didn't even think about, I was thinking fusion of mind, body, and spirit. It was, and that's all I was thinking about. It was like a year and a half in, I'm like, oh, I also have a spinal fusion. This was like, it was just still, it never even crossed my mind that that's where, because what I was thinking was, I want, because I believe, the integration of mind, body, and spirit are so key that I wanted to fuse these. And that was it. The spine part and the fusion part didn't cross my mind until I was just like, oh gosh, Elizabeth, come on, wake up. What's wrong? you know?
It's a great name.
Yeah, likewise. Well, thanks so much for joining me. It was a pleasure meeting you, and I'm glad once again that I got to share space with another scoliosis warrior, because I'm telling you, I didn't grow up with anybody not one person did I know have scoliosis other than my mother. So nobody, no peer.
Yeah, I didn't
And
meet until I was in my mid-30s who had scoliosis.
yeah,
There's-
and it's just, and I still don't know anybody in town who's 46 with scoliosis that I know, that I mean, I know we get older and our friends are all ages, but
You can call
I
me.
what?
You can call me.
Okay. Well, you have a great day, have a great yoga class, and everybody be sure to check out Stacy Joyce's work on Instagram and her website. Oh my goodness.
Well,
I already
thank you so
forgot.
much, Elizabeth. This was
You're
fun.
so welcome. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Have a great day, okay? Have a great class.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.